far. So just to introduce myself, I'm Councillor Helen and I'm the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency and Sustainable Development. On behalf of Southwark Council, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone here for giving up their time this evening and also over the coming weeks and months to be involved in this process, which I'm sure is unlike anything that you've been involved in before. I took on this role in May, and even as someone who did have some background working on climate change, this has been a really steep learning curve for me, and I've been learning a huge amount. I've been a councillor since 2015, representing Chaucer Ward, which is in the north of the borough, around Borough High Street in Elephant and Castle, down to Bricklayers Arms. And I've lived myself in Southwark since 2003, at various points in Peckham, East Dulwich, Nunhead, and off the Old Kent Road. I have a toddler who might interrupt us, she's screaming at the moment in the background. And so that's also shaping my own views on climate change, because this is also about her future. From the outset, I want to stress that this citizens' jury is a really core piece of work for us as we think about how we respond to climate change in Southwark. And so I just wanted to start by setting out where this has come from and where we see it going. The council has long been concerned about climate change, and for some years we've been taking steps to reduce our own carbon emissions and also to think about how we deal with some of the consequences of climate change on our doorstep, particularly the likely increase in flooding due to warming temperatures. In 2019, spurred on by campaign groups like Extinction Rebellion, the council declared a climate emergency, recognising that we needed to do much more locally, and subsequently decided that a citizens' jury, a group of people that are broadly representative of the borough, might even hold different views on climate change. Some might know a lot, some might not know very much at all, but that would be a really good way to hear different perspectives and ideas on what we should be prioritising. Again, this was an idea that came from the grassroots outside of the council, and both citizens' juries and the larger citizens' assemblies have also been used by other councils to explore climate change with local residents. So just to say a couple of things about why we think this is a Southwark issue. Climate change, as everyone knows, doesn't care about borders. This is a global issue with consequences for everyone, but often hitting the poorest hardest. And it has particular consequences for future generations, although the impacts are also being felt now. So as councillors, we're concerned not just with the here and now, but also about the kind of borough that we want to be in 10, 20, 30 years' time. Southwark is home to over 300,000 people. We have a lot of young adults. It's a hugely diverse borough, and it's also a borough of significant inequalities, and people bring very different life experiences to the table. We've got 39% of people in the borough living in social rented housing, council or housing association properties, increasing numbers of people in the private rented sector, and the rest who own their own homes. Sadly, we also have 3,000 households in temporary accommodation at the moment. Our hope is to develop work on climate change that resonates with everyone, and in particular to try and prioritise things that will actually help reduce inequality at the same time as addressing climate change. And what can the council actually do? So I think there are a number of different roles that we can play. Firstly, we can directly invest in things to reduce our own carbon emissions. For example, switching over to LED lighting in our offices or using electric vehicles. And because we're the biggest social landlord in London, there are lots of changes that we can make to our council estates in particular. Secondly, we can invest in things that help the wider community to tackle climate change, things like cycle storage or recycling bins. Thirdly, we can set the rules around things like planning and development, licensing, parking and traffic to ensure new buildings are as green as possible and to ban cars from outside school gates. Fourthly, we can use our purchasing power to ensure that the things we buy or invest in as a council are as good for the environment as possible. And fifthly, we can also run campaigns, help raise public awareness and bring people together to work on issues. So there's a lot we can do, but we want to know what you think is most important, to hear ideas that we haven't thought of yet, and also to hear your views on difficult questions like who pays for things, should things be compulsory or voluntary, what do we do when things are unpopular? Earlier this year, the council published its initial climate change strategy and action plan, which was pulled together following consultation with the community, although we obviously had lots of challenges because of COVID. So we have a document which is helping guide action now, and which includes 85 things to be getting on with under 5 themes. And the 5 themes that we're working with at the moment are greener buildings, active and sustainable transport, thriving natural environments, green and circular economy, and renewable energy. But we also have a commitment that we will aim to integrate recommendations from the citizens' jury into an updated action plan later next year. So the things that you're doing, your work this evening and over the coming weeks and months, will make a difference. Last night at our council assembly, which is the decision-making body of the council, we passed a motion that called on the cabinet, the council's leadership, which includes myself, to work to implement all the recommendations of the jury within the council's capacity and to work with all concerned stakeholders to respond to your recommendations. Because of course you might also have recommendations for individuals, for shops and other businesses, for tenants and residents groups, for faith communities or other organisations in the borough. In terms of what this means in practice, we're planning to receive your report at our March Cabinet meeting next year, and we will provide an initial response to that. We have local elections in May, but following that, the intention is to update our strategy and action plan to take account of the jury's work. And we very much hope that there will be other events and opportunities to promote and talk about the work that you've all done together. So I'll leave it there. I'm really excited to join you briefly this evening and to see what comes out the other side of this process. And I very much hope that you enjoy this whole experience of learning and working through these issues together. Thanks.
Thank you, Helen.